All right, so I have read every single comic book of The Walking Dead, and this will be a review of issue 193. So lots of spoilers, so if you don't want to know what happens in the comic books, don't listen anymore. All right, so 193 is actually the last comic in The Walking Dead, which means The Walking Dead as a storyline is now over, which came as quite a shock to many people that read the comic books, because they know that the creator, Robert Kirkman, wanted the series to be an ongoing story that never ended. He even, if he was going to have an end, put out the magical number of 300 issues. So it came as a big shock. 193, no one saw it coming. They even went to special efforts to make sure no one saw it coming. They created fake or false covers to give out in the catalog orders. I guess comic book stores order issues well in advance, so they had to put out multiple issues to appear as if the series was going to continue. So people were ordering issues that were never ever going to come out, just as a way for them to hide the fact that the series was actually going to end. They wanted it to be a shock for people, which is really cool. I think that they did that. I guess it would be difficult for people if you're a store owner or not. So what I wanted to do was give a little bit of summary of what this last issue was, what the story was, what happened, give some of my thoughts on it as well, and I guess really give some of my thoughts on it. So, but to do that, I kind of need to give a summary first. So issue 191, Rick Grimes dies. He's the main character, which has been followed throughout the series. He dies in issue 191. Technically, it's 192. You don't know he dies until 192. And then 192 is his son, Carl, having to basically pick up the pieces, figure out who killed his dad, why they killed him, and figure out what they're going to do with his dad's killer. How will there be justice? And then 193, there's a huge time jump. And you don't know it from the start. You just see this one lone stray walker. Walkers are what they call zombies, in case you aren't familiar with the series. So this one stray walker who you see get killed with a sword, and then you see it's a man with an eye patch. But it's not Carl, because he's a lot older than Carl. But then you find out, oh, it is Carl. There's been a time jump. And there's been at least a 10-year time jump, probably closer to 15 to 20 years, maybe 25-year time jump. And where we are now in the Walking Dead universe is that there has not been a walker within the safe zone or the Commonwealth, so the safety zone, in many, many years. You see, Carl is now married. He has a daughter who's 5 or 6 years old, and she has never once seen a walker or zombie. So Carl had to make sure he killed this thing before his daughter saw it. He wanted to keep her safe from that world, which you find out is why Carl is now wearing the eye patch again, because many people simply do not know or understand the world of issues 1 through 192. Many people have forgotten that world. I find that so hard to believe, because so many people should not have forgotten that world up to this point, because so many of them live through it still, but they're acting as if Carl is one of the few which have lived through. Now, obviously, there would be a lot of people born teenager year and younger that simply are unaware of this time period, and they're calling it the trials. So issues 1 through 192 are called the trials, as well as, I'm assuming, some of the time in this time leap. And this is the case because there's a lot of safety now. And there's a big stress that the safety they currently have, they have because of Rick Grimes and his sacrifices and efforts. They're now living the world that Rick Grimes envisioned, fought for, gave his life for, and Rick Grimes is now a hero. Although you already saw that occurring. People were already picturing Carl as a hero, and people finally began to meet Carl. They're like, wow, you're the Carl Grimes. You're the son of Rick Grimes. You're Carl. So even Carl had a big clout to him. The Grimes family name means a lot. Okay, so this is the world we're living in, and it gets really crazy because Carl's like, why is this walker here? We live in the outskirts of the safety zone society area. We kind of live in this farm area. How did this walker get past the guards, the watchmen? And he comes to the idea, this must mean Herschel is in town. Herschel, we find out, is Glenn and Maggie's son grown up. And the reason there would be a zombie in town because Herschel's in town is because Herschel has a traveling freak show of zombies, of walkers. And so he has gone outside the safe zone. He has captured walkers. He stores them in a wagon that he pulls from town to town by horse. In this world now, they don't really use cars at all. They've, gas has run out, I assume, and they're just not in that world. It's a world of horses. So he pulls this wagon around with the zombies. People pay money to see these zombies, and it's big money for him. And so because there's a zombie, he's assuming Herschel must be in town, and that is the case. Herschel's actually happy that Carl's the one that found the walker, but he's not happy because he finds out Carl killed the zombie. And so Carl gets fined for this, gets taken to court because this walker is private property. We're now at the point that zombies are private property. At least Herschel's the only one that we see of that owns them, all right? And he makes a lot of money off them. So Carl, instead of being fined because he's Rick's son, gets let off of this penalty of just having to replace the walker he killed. Carl says, forget that, and in the middle of the night kills every single one of Herschel's walkers and then leaves town because we find out that Carl's occupation now is a messenger. He goes outside of the safe zone and delivers messages and goods to the frontiersmen. So they're still working to extend the borders of the Commonwealth. And so there are frontiersmen, and we see Eugene. He's working on extending the railroad system that they got in place, and they're soon to have the railroad in the east with the Commonwealth match and meet the railroad that's going out from the west. So we're about to connect the east and the west. It's never said how far west is. We're assuming the United States, California, but we don't know that for sure. Maybe the west at this time is Texas or something. But they're working to meet the railroads together. We don't know how far the railroad has gone. We just know it's gone quite a ways. So here we are. Carl kills them all and goes out. And he knows he's not going to be in any trouble for this killing for quite a while because his messenger route is going to have him outside the safe zone for quite a long time. When he returns, he gets put on trial. Like I said, I think I already said this, Maggie is now the president of the Commonwealth, has been for a while, and her presidency and leadership is what is given as the reason for why Herschel is such a delinquent in the eyes of Carl. He thinks it's an absurdity that Glenn's son, Maggie's son, keeps walkers and carries them around. But I think that's a cool throwback to Herschel's granddad, who was also named Herschel. He kept zombies. He kept them in his barn, although he kept them from a different reason. He kept them because he knew they were once the living. They were once people, and he was hoping to keep them instead of kill them so that there could hopefully one day be a cure for them so they can be restored. Herschel keeps them to make money off them. Anyways, Carl gives this fiery good old speech like his dad does and basically points out there's no need to keep walkers. It's an atrocity. And in a blink of a moment, in an instant, we could be back to the way things once were. Something could go bad in the world that they've established, which is at peace right now, no longer living in the trials, could go back to utter chaos in any moment. And he sees Herschel keeping these walkers as being a precursor to that. Or a way that things could go back to that way. These are not novelty items. And of course, the judge is Michonne. She is now a judge in the Commonwealth, the head judge it seems, and she says, of course, I'm not charging you, and I'm making it a law right now that keeping these walkers is illegal. And so Carl gets set free. Herschel then confronts him and basically says, you know what, bro? My dad isn't remembered as your dad. My dad isn't a hero like your dad. And you know what? I think people need to remember that there is danger out there. And by keeping these walkers present, showing them to people, is the way we can keep the memory of my dad alive. Keep the memory of your dad alive. Let them be remindful of how bad things actually were. And Carl has absolutely nothing to say in response to this. It actually kind of sets him back a little bit. And I thought that was good, because you know what? If it weren't for Glenn, if it weren't for Herschel's dad, Glenn, Rick would be dead. Rick would be dead. Glenn saved him. Glenn saved Maggie, the president of the Commonwealth. No one's remembering Glenn. And this just as easily could have been Rick's death instead of Glenn's death, if you know how Glenn died in issue 100. What brought about his demise? You know it was by pure coincidence that it was Glenn and not Rick that died. So Glenn could just as easily be the big hero. All right, so here are my thoughts on this and things to just kind of say. I really like that they pointed that out. It makes me think the heroes that we do have in our life, they had other people that supported them and made it to where they were. Usually in history, we pick one person to celebrate, but there were just as many people in that person's life that should be celebrated as well, that are worthy of celebration and worthy of remembrance. And we simply can't remember them all. That's one thing. The second thing I thought of was, we have it so easy now, because I read this comic book literally the day before Memorial Day, or it was Memorial Day morning, I forget. And I was sitting there thinking, like, there were people in this zombie world that gave their lives through the trials so they could now have this peaceful existence of luxury that they now have. Such a luxury where you can have people like Herschel with zombie wagon trails that are freak shows. No one's seen these things before anymore. They've become a novelty. And so it made me start thinking about our current day and age. I live in a time of luxury, even though there has been war since 2001. And in my lifetime, there was Desert Storm. But for the most part, there has not been a major war like Vietnam, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. These wars just have not happened. And, you know, especially you think about the Civil War, World War I, Civil War, Revolutionary War. These were wars that took place in our land. And people could not escape that. World War I, World War II, people had to give up rations, you know. People were drafted. Same thing with Vietnam War. People were drafted. This stuff came to roost in a way that the war on terrorism simply has not. It's not in our face as much. We have not lost as many lives with the war on terrorism as we have with World War I, World War II, Vietnam, some of these wars. So it just has not had the impact as much. It's not been in our face as much. And because of that, you know, it's just kind of just like a luxury lifestyle. And when could it fall apart? Anytime. And I'm not always as thankful as I should be for the people that gave their lives for the freedoms and luxury that I now have, which is kind of what you see happening at the end of this issue, where people begin to make fun of Carl because of his eye patch. And it's kids that they have not experienced what Carl experienced through the trials. So it's to be more thankful for what we do have. And to also think about, because I haven't really gone through some of the atrocities of war and things, there are a lot of movies of war. So instead of having the, in the Walking Dead series, issue 193, they don't yet have TVs and stuff like that, programming and movies. But like Herschel's thing would be the closest you can get to reenacting and showing this is the horrors of the trials. And so we have lots of movies about this, which are now called entertainment. But they can serve a purpose of reminding us of the sacrifices made before. And so that's something I just kind of walked away with thinking, and I thought that was a really cool way to end the comic series, and just some other cool things they had there to show that it was a complete story arc. You know, the first 100 issues really were Rick and Glenn. And Glenn died 100. And so I thought it was nice to finally end the series with, you got Rick's son and you got Glenn's son, to kind of see where the two of them have ended up. And then also this complete story arc of Rick Grimes at the start, he is saying, we are the Walking Dead. And in issue 191, I believe it was, he ends up saying, no, we are not the Walking Dead. We are the living. And so for my Christian worldview, I really resonated a lot with this idea of we are the Walking Dead. If you do not have Jesus Christ in your life, you are the walking dead. That's what you are. You are spiritually dead. This fits directly with Ephesians 2, in which you used to walk, right? The sins, you used to walk in your sins and trespasses, you used to walk in death. So you're walking even though you are dead. There is no future for you. But for the person who has been made alive in Christ, we are the living. There is life after death for us. And so kind of the battle of this, right? I relate to that, and I find something cool to think about there. But I really like just the story arc. Rick now comes to see we are not the walking dead. We are the living. And so for nihilism, this worldview of nothingness, there is no meaning and purpose to life, which is objective and absolute for every person. So in essence, within nihilism, we are the walking dead. There is no reason to live besides for the here and now. But when you see the eternity that we have prepared for us by Christ and in Christ, we now can see that there is a purpose and meaning to everything in this life. And that's some things I got out of The Walking Dead. There were a lot of other little spiritual things I got from The Walking Dead. I've made a couple videos on that, a blog post on that, and a podcast on that. I will link those in this description. Anyways, guys, The Walking Dead is over. I encourage you to read the series if you would like to know more about it. But that's my summary, that's my thoughts, that's my reflection on it. And there you go.